Hey everybody, what's up? I know I've talked about this various times, and I'm not the only one that constantly talks about it. But what I want to talk about is the difference between animation here in the US and in Japan. See, the animation here in the US and Japan is a lot different than we care to admit. But we're not the only country that's different in animation. Other countries are the same way. Germany, Europe, Brazil, Australia, China, the list goes on and on. Russia, But the thing is, you can compare all those countries' animation styles and what they do and the risks they take with us. And unfortunately, and I hate to say this, it's nothing compared to what Japan does. I mean, you could compare them to Japan and they can't compare with what Japan does. I'll give you an example. You see, here in the US, the only adult animation we ever have is Late at Night. And that barely has anything happening. We only hear the sounds, and that's it. Now, here's the thing. There's a lot of variety of things. There's a variety of situations that take place in animation in certain series and movies here in the US. But the difference is when we do them in a series and a movie here in the US, it's only for that episode, or it's only for maybe a few moments in that movie. Now, in Japan, it's a lot more different. You see, Japan, when they do the same kind of situations, they do it for a lot longer. Now, I'm not saying other countries don't do the same thing. I'm pretty sure Germany does it. I'm sure Europe, Australia, all those countries do it. But the thing is, Japan always does it for a longer term. Now, Japan also takes a lot more risks in animation than we do here in the US. But so do other countries. A lot of people think that other countries don't take the risk that Japan takes. Well, they do. Some do. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you which country that I know of. Germany. Germany takes a huge risk sometimes. I'll tell you why. I was watching a dual review between Huey Two Moore and the Hardcore Kid on the movie Ferdinand. I think that's how you pronounce it. And that movie is an animated cat movie. Basically, it's an animated movie with cats as the main characters, sort of a Sherlock Holmes kind of deal. Now you think to yourself, well, that doesn't sound too bad. That sounds like it's friendly enough, good enough for families. It's not, folks. It's not. It's an adult animated movie. Now, I'm not talking the kind of adult animation movie that you've heard about from Japan and all that. I'll get into that in a little bit. Now, I'm talking horror-wise. I'm talking violent-wise. I'm talking like, even if you're squeamish, you couldn't take it. Because basically what Ferdinand is an animated German film where we see dead cats, basically. Basically, the death of cats are being investigated. Cats being murdered. We see beheaded cats. We see cats getting the stomachs ripped open with the guts spilling out. Very graphic, folks. And it's not for kids and it's not for everybody. Heck, even Huey Two Moore visually kind of showed how some people like him would react to it by taking a bag and barfing in it. Or visually showing that you'd have to have a bag or a bowl next to you if you're squeamish so you can barf inside it. So that, in a way, proves that Japan is not the only country out there that takes risks and goes to areas in animation that the US doesn't. But, again, even if you were to compare that movie, Ferdinand, with any other animated horror movie or adult animated movie that Japan would do itself, or would produce and release itself, that's nothing compared to what they have. It's nothing. If you were to take Ferdinand from Japan and compare it with Vampire Hunter D from Japan, not Ferdinand further down from Germany, I should say, excuse me, and compare it with Vampire Hunter D from Japan, there's no comparison, folks. You know that as well as I do. There is no comparison. But, surprisingly, that's not the only thing that you can't compare it to with Japan. Again, I mentioned earlier that there are some situations in Japan, in animation, that take place in animation, I should say, that are done here in the US when it comes to an animated series or a movie. And it's only for like in a movie, it's only like for short term, maybe 15, 20 minutes, or 5 minutes. But in Japan, it's long term. I'll give you an example. Absorption. Absorption basically is sort of like eating, or boring people, or soft boring people, whatever you want to call it. But basically absorption. Here in the U.S., when we have a character get absorbed, even if it's a main character or a mid-main character or whatever, it's only temporary. It's only temporary. It's maybe for that episode, or if it's in a movie, it's maybe for about 5-10 minutes, and that's it. In Japan, it's a lot longer. I'll give you an example. Here's an example. Dragon Ball Z. A very popular anime. Everybody loves Dragon Ball Z. The live-action movie was less than stellar. Let's put it that way. And, well, you get the idea. Was more than desired. But Dragon Ball Z as an anime is one of the most popular animes Japan has ever had. And it had its situations, it's had its share of different situations and stuff. And absorption's no different. Like I said, here in the US and probably some other countries, it's only like for maybe an episode, or at least maybe 5 to 10 minutes in a movie. In Japan, it's long term. And Dragon Ball Z, like I said, is no exception. Because there's a character, very popular I believe, called Android 18. And in an episode of Dragon Ball Z, she gets absorbed through her tail by a villainous character. I can't think of the character's name right now. Now she tries attacking this character, and she ends up getting absorbed through his tail and into his body. So basically she is absorbed and unwillingly merged and becomes part of him. Thus, by doing that, he gains her powers and her strength. Now you say to yourself, what does that have to do with what you're saying? Well, what it has to do is, you would think, okay, they'll probably get her out before the episode's over, right? Nope. They have to wait almost a whole season, from what I've read and understood, almost a whole season, before this character that absorbs her is put in a situation where he has to throw her up. Literally, has to throw her up. I don't know if it's through the mouth or through the stomach, but literally he releases her from his grasp. So yeah, it takes almost most of the season, from what I understand, for that to happen. Now, you might say to yourself, well, that shouldn't be much of a surprise, seeing as though Japan, the Japanese animators and storytellers like to, long it out. They like to string it out. They like to continue it. They like to pull it out. You know what I'm saying? Kind of stuff like that. They like to stretch it out. There you go. But you see, that's the major difference here in the U.S. The U.S. may have it happen a couple of times. Has had it happen a couple of times. There's no doubt about that. But majority of the time, Japan has done it. Other countries and their animated cartoons, series, and movies, like I said, probably do it as long as the U.S. does. Maybe a little longer than Japan does, but Japan does it mostly for almost a majority run of the show. Another example is the transformation. You see, in an episode sometimes, when somebody gets transformed into something or turned into something, it's only for that episode. And that's here in the U.S. and probably some other countries. But in Japan, it's almost like a permanent basis, or it just comes out of nowhere. A good example of this is Revolutionary Girl Utena the movie. A very good movie if you see it. But basically the end of that movie is a huge mindfuck for people. It's a huge mindfuck. You see, because at the end of the movie, Utena, or towards the end of the movie, Utena turns into a car. Now for those that read the manga and have seen the animated series, this never happens. But in the movie, which is a retelling of the origins and all that, it happens. Basically the way the director put it was, for the majority of the movie, Anthe was the princess, Utena was the prince. But when Utena got turned into a car, the roles reversed. Anthe became the prince, Utena became the Sleeping Beauty princess, and the only way for her to awaken Utena was to put the key, which used to be the rose signet, into her ignition, turn her on, drive her out into the real world, and as soon as they reach the real world, that's the only way Utena could return to normal. Now here in the US, if something like that happens, in an animated cartoon or movie, like I said, it's only for maybe a couple, in a movie it's maybe for a couple of minutes. Even in live action it's like that. In fact, when Disney did their version of My Favorite Martian, the wife or the love interest of Jeff Daniels in that movie turned herself into a monster temporarily at the end to basically beat the hell out of the bad guys and eat one of them. Now, there have been other occasions about this too. RoboCop Alpha Commando is a good one. There's an episode called H2O, and one of the main villainists in this episode, in the series, uses a formula to turn into a water woman, into a liquid woman, which allows her to go through cracks as a puddle, turn herself into a fountain, and to distract some security guards, turn her whole body into a big finger and press a button. This was only temporary, and it was only for that episode. You see what I'm saying, folks, is in Japan, sometimes it's a lot longer. Like the Utena deal was for about 20-25 minutes of the movie. That's almost the whole episode here in the US. But the thing is, here in the US, again, when we do something like that, sometimes it is for an episode, and sometimes it's just for a couple of moments. Just for a few moments. Darkwing Duck's a good example. In Slime OK, You're OK, that's a good example right there. Now, the other thing about this difference between Japan animation, US animation, and other animation around the world is Japan's a lot more weirder at times when it comes to the animation. What I mean is, when they do their animation, sometimes they use weird imagery. Again, going back to Utena, there's some imagery in there that people say are complete mindfucks. Like a woman gets wrapped up in a blanket like a cocoon and then turns into a butterfly-like moth. That's the kind of imagery people find a little unusual. But then folks, you get into the other kind of animation out there. The adult animation. Very adult animation. And when they show the what scenes, the sex scenes if you will, sometimes it's straightforward. And sometimes it's like visually, what the fuck am I seeing? Because visually, when you say, what the fuck am I seeing? Take 1001 Nights. Take 1001 Nights. It was made back in the 60s. That would give you an idea of what, as some of the scenes there. That's almost like visually like, what the fuck am I watching? You take a look at Bandor Book. Take a look at that one. And sometimes that's almost like, it's unusual, and it's a little weird, but you kind of get an idea. It's almost like an anime version of Superman, but it's a lot different, and you got a character there that can almost become anything she wants. So, overall, what I'm saying is, the animation difference between Japan and the US is very different to the point, folks, that some things, that they take risk that we don't, just like some other countries take risk, but Japan, they take it a lot more than we do, and a lot more than other countries. And one of the biggest risks they take is the adult animation. I mean the adult animation, if you know what I mean. So, That's all I'm going to say about it. Give me your thoughts below. Tell me what you think. Do you agree or not agree with what I said? And I'll talk to you later.